three of us, what we could be. I think about it all the time.
Please. It's terrible.
No, it's not. I know June. She's my friend. I care about her. How's your day going? You look pretty.
Thanks. I wore it just for you. Her father's a driver named Nick. He helped me to survive. Yes, you can, because I can't lose you.
I'm not gonna let anything happen to you.
What about you?
Your girlfriend is a badass.
Welcome to Above the Garage, a Nick and June, the Handmaid's Tale podcast. Hi, friends. Welcome to our deep dive into season 1, episode 8, which is entitled Jezebels. This deep dive episode is intended for longtime fans of the show. So if you are a new fan, go and find our spoiler-free episode that we released on Monday, because this episode, we're going to talk about the show in the context of the show to date, which is through season 4. Let's do our round of introductions.
Hi, I'm Wanda.
Hi, I'm Scarlett.
Hi, I'm Megan.
Hi, I'm Violet.
Hi, I'm Tina.
And I'm Kate. So obviously we all love this episode. Episode 8 starts out with June waking up in Nick's bed.
And it might be my favorite episode opening of all of the episodes that
Definitely.
I mean, at this point we've seen all of them to date, but it's such a good opening. You know, it's so
Do we
soft.
ever see them cuddle like that again? Do we get that opportunity?
No.
No.
They're
hope
doing
so.
it. They just won't let us see it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm hoping for season 5.
Oh, me too. Cuddling. My absolute season 5 wish is quality time between Nick and June. Actually, whatever happens, Nick cannot have sex with the handmaid or I'm out. So I suppose that's my number one wish. But I digress. Back to the episode at hand. Scarlett, you wanted to talk about Nick's background, right?
Yeah, I have something that I've been thinking about ever since, I figured we were going to do, Nick's backstory episode soon. And a few recordings ago, I remember Wanda was talking about the scene in season 3 where Luke goes to see Fred in Canada and he tells Fred how they were men of similar upbringing, meaning they were, both men of faith and, educated, college educated, I guess is what he meant.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of got me thinking about how our upbringing is really what shapes who we become as adults, early on. It's really interesting to kind of think of these characters' upbringings. Obviously, we're thinking about Nick, but before I get to that, Nick, Luke, and June were both raised in the same society. They didn't have the same opportunities June and Luke did, but Nick obviously we didn't have the same opportunities as they did. But they still grew in the same society. We live in a patriarchal society, and how that reflects on those three characters is something that calls my attention because we don't know much about Luke's upbringing. We know that he was married, obviously, and what he said to Fred. And I've always said Luke isn't a bad man. The things that he does, he doesn't do because he wants to hurt people. But
Exactly. And that's what I think is so brilliant about the writing on the show is that they showcase these two groups of very different people are both instrumental in letting something like this happen. There's the young impoverished men that are targeted by a cult and get into something that they didn't realize they were getting into. And it's too late to get out before they realize it. And then there's the Lukes of the world who are just subtly misogynistic. And when their wives' rights and money get taken away, they don't get enraged the way they should. They just say, oh, it's okay. I'll take care of you. And I just think it's really brilliant how the show showcases both of these groups and these two characters so well. But like you're saying, Luke's not a malicious guy at all.
it's just a consequence of living in a patriarchal society and how that subtle misogyny is there and doesn't allow you to see things from a different perspective. I also see that he doesn't want to learn. He's not open to listening. And we saw that in episode 7, he didn't really understand how these things affected June. And then June, we know that she wasn't raised with a father figure in her house. So I think that's why she settles for Luke. She was looking for that, what she didn't have growing up, a father figure and a husband and the traditional family. And then with Nick, we do know that family is very, very important to him, but he comes from a working class family to work at the steel mill. And we know he's looking for a job to take care of his family. So he's young. So that's not usually something that young people with opportunities are doing. So we already know that his family situation is a little heavy, maybe. And I think that shapes him early on. Throughout the seasons, I've always said this, and I'm going to die on this hill, and I've gotten so much hate for saying this. on social media, but for me, Nick is the least misogynistic character of the show. I mean, and I think he's presented that way for a reason, obviously with a huge mark that he joined the Sons of Jacob. But again, if we see this episode and we understand how cults work, these groups don't go around handing out brochures saying, this is our plan, we're going to enslave women. And then Nick's like, ooh, that sounds like fun, let me join. That's not what happened. These groups prey on your vulnerability and your weakness, and then they get you to do what they want. And then they just get you.
Right. And that side note reminds me later in the series when Serena implies to June that he was a founder of Gilead, basically, integral to the founding of Gilead. Just how ridiculous it is to believe that when he was a 19-year-old that got swept into this cult, and then after the takeover, he's given the role of a driver, a lowly driver. So, believing that he had played a larger role doesn't quite add up to me.
He's also a man of faith, which we see in this episode too, when he's talking to Price about, scripture, and, he knows his scripture. So obviously that's something that happens in your upbringing. That's where you learn it. Something that calls my attention is he's a man of faith, but, he lives his faith. He doesn't have to constantly talk about his faith. Sometimes it's very shocking to me how, people completely forget that other people have other faiths, and, we have to be respectful because every faith is important. So that to me also is something that I enjoy about his character, because he is a man of faith, but he's not hypocritical about it. Part of who he is. So why do I say he's the least misogynistic character? Like, out of the top of my head, there's quite a few examples that I can give, taking June out of the equation and the way that he treats her, because obviously we're going to be discussing that. But in this episode, for example, we see how he treats Beth. Mm-hmm. We see that, he gets herbs from the garden, he steals the herbs from Serena's garden. And we see that he's really pleased with himself that he brought her this little detail that she enjoys so much. Again, it shows that he likes to take care of the people that he cares about. We also get that they both had some sort of agreement, like a physical relationship of the sorts. And when she proposes him this time, he turns her down. He's not an asshole about it either. He simply just says not tonight. And obviously we know that he already has slept with June many times. And we also know that he's obviously catching feelings for her. So, that also speaks to what type of guy he is. He didn't have to do that. And I don't think the show would have given us that scene if that scene wasn't important in his backstory episode. Even with Serena in season 2, when Holly's gone, he gives her a cigarette, and he knows Serena's a freaking bitch. Mm-hmm. But you don't really see him mistreating her.
Oh, that actually bugs me how respectful he is to Serena. I know it's, like you said, just because he treats women so respectfully. But after everything she's done to Offred One and Eden and June, I wouldn't mind him be a little ruder to her.
I mean, obviously he can't, but I think there's a different dynamic there. There's also Rita. Marigold mentioned in a past episode how, he finishes his coffee and he washes his cup. He really doesn't have to do the dishes. He's a man in Gilead. And there's the ever controversial Eden situation, which I know we're going to get into in season 2, but, people have to remember that this was forced into him. He married a 15-year-old girl, which is technically statutory rape in the normal world, not in Gilead, obviously. So he didn't know how to deal with it. And characters are not supposed to be perfect. They're supposed to be able to make mistakes. So I like that in the end, everybody that kind of mistreated her because she was a little too pious for their liking, including the audience, by the end, we all felt like shit, just like he did, and he carries a lot of guilt and regret for that and for joining the Sons of Jacob. I think that's been established early on in the whole show. So those things talk about his character and about how good he really is. And another thing that also I enjoy watching is just how selfless he is. We've seen that in multiple episodes when he brings June the information about Luke from Canada. I think that's one of the most heartbreaking and beautiful scenes that I've seen. And I think that's when I realized he really, really, really loves this woman, because he's doing that because he knows that's going to bring her happiness in this shitty place. And it's killing him to do so. And also the fact that he lets her go, he lets her and his daughter go because he knows that's what's best for everybody, without expecting to ever see them again. We see that in 4-9 when they get reunited. He tells her, and I never thought I was going to give this to you personally. He was looking for her until he knew she made it to Canada, because for him, what he had with June was just in Gilead. Once she got out of Gilead, she was going to go back to her husband and retake whatever life she could retake back. He didn't expect anything else. So he risked everything for her, knowing that he wasn't going to get what he wanted in return, which is his family. Because again, throughout this episode, we see how important family is to him. That's his weakness. So I don't think a guy that's raised in a patriarch society gets to be like that out of coincidence or out of the blue. I think certain things have to happen in order for them to realize, wait a minute, this is wrong, or how can I be better? Because it's something that's normalized. So
I think it has to do with his upbringing, and I think it has to do with his mom. I mean, we don't know anything about his mom, so this is kind of like a headcanon for me. I think that either one or two things could have happened in my headcanon. Either his family life, even though they were working class, was okay. Like they have his mom and his dad had a loving relationship, and he saw that growing up, and she was a good mom. So he really identified with his mom, or it was the exact opposite. Because usually when you have like complete opposite or traumatic family experiences, you kind of change your views, or either you follow in the footsteps or you do the exact opposite.
Mm-hmm.
I do think his mom passed away. I think, maybe, she got sick, she died, they were struggling economically. They didn't have money for the insurance. And I think that like messed up the family dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
If his mom would have been a mom that left, like she just got fed up for some reason and she just abandoned them, he wouldn't see women the way that he sees women. He would be a Gilead believer.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why his brother like completely lost himself, and here's Nick trying to hold his family together, whatever he had left. And I think that's maybe eventually why he got so, detached from things, and why he says, it's best not to form attachments, because he tried to do the best he could to save his family and he couldn't. And then he got involved in this group, and then he realized that he had made the wrong choice. So I think that weighs heavy on him. But I do think that at some point, hopefully, I don't know if the show will give us that, but I do honestly think it's in my headcanon that his mother was the one that shaped him to be, the type of character that he is, which for me is very refreshing to see, because we don't get to see that on TV very often. And it's very well portrayed. And I think that's what really draws me to his character.
Mm-hmm.
So there was, to go back to his history and, the type of family environment he grew up in, there was a hint to that in the script that got cut in the scene with Price. He does mention that his family would go to rent a cabin on Lake Mackinac in the summer. So I think he had kind of the more wholesome family experience you talked about. He came from a loving family, not one that was very split or, divided. Like, I don't think it was divorce or anything. And I think that's apparent too, in 2-6, when June comes back from her near-death experience. And what does he say? Well, I think about us, the three of us, what we could be. So he's clearly got this idealized, he wants to be a family. Yeah. So he wants that experience, I think, that he grew up with. So yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah. They really laid the foundation for who he was in this episode. And then as time has gone on, it's only proven it over and over and over again.
He tried to get his daughter out before she was even born.
Right.
Yeah.
He orchestrated that whole thing. When we saw him gone, when June went to him for comfort after seeing Hannah, he was gone planning that whole escape. People were like saying, that wasn't him. And I'm like, yeah, it was. The very first escape was pretty much all Nick.
Yeah.
Yeah. I answered something on Twitter, and I used the GIF that says Godspeed June when she's in the hospital and the Guardian leaves her the key.
Oh, yeah.
And I read the Godspeed June and I was like, okay. And then all of a sudden I was like, how the fuck did he know her name is June?
I know.
Nick.
Right.
It was Nick.
Nick.
Right.
But this is Nick's plan. And people don't get that. It's just my head wants to explode, because I'm like, he's there. He brings her in. She rips off her. Come on. He's there. Don't you see it, people?
Yeah.
This is sort of loosely related to that, but I just wanted to mention it before I forgot. When Claudia and I were watching the episode, she brought up the fact that Moira's story about her escape is so similar to June's Were you gonna say that too, Tina?
No, I was gonna say something else. It reminded me. I'll say it after you finish.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, just when Moira tells June about her escape when they're in the bathroom, it's a very similar story to what June ends up doing with her attempted escape later with when Nick tries to get her out.
Yeah, she mentions an office park. She got holed up in an office park. So I was like, was she also
Yep.
at the Boston Globe?
Oh,
That
good
was
point.
immediately went into my head. I was like, oh my God, maybe Moira was there too. Yeah, I put that in my notes. Yeah.
I didn't pick that up. That is interesting.
Yeah.
So in the beginning of the episode, when Nick says June like that, I think that's the first time that you hear him say June the way that we often hear him say June. And, in 4-9, it really brings her back to herself. And at the reunion at the Magdalene school, Magdalena. Anyway, the soft way that he said June, I love that. I love the way both of them say each other's names.
Mm-hmm.
Me too.
Also, just when she's saying like, I want to know him, I want to memorize him so I can live on the image of him later. I mean, she does. She does that very well, because you can see even in Canada when she's, cutting her hair and her hands are like moving around as if exactly where Nick was like touching her on the bridge and stuff. Like, I do wish the show would show us more flashbacks of the things, the voiceovers and the flashbacks that she's thinking about Nick in season 4, but without showing us anything, they still show us that she is.
Counter argument.
Yes.
I like the idea of them not flashing back to Nick, because it's she doesn't have to idealize her relationship with him.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
still present.
It's still, exactly.
I like that too.
Yeah.
I like that too.
It's not fading, so she doesn't have to grasp.
Yeah.
Because he's like the only one she
true.
doesn't really flash back to.
Yeah, like I'm actually with
he's not
you.
fading from her memory.
Yeah,
exactly.
Does anybody notice that she sniffs everybody she loves?
Yeah.
She like inhales them.
Yeah.
Maybe she
Especially
has
like
some
Nick.
sort of like aura absorbing special talent, because she does.
And smell is tied.
Well,
really
honestly,
deeply
though,
to
it's for memory.
too.
It's she wanted,
Yeah.
she wanted to, memorize him, and scent is huge.
And she did it with she does it with Hannah too, I think, right?
Yeah,
With,
and she did it
Summer
with
House?
Nicole when she
baby
before she gave it
clothes.
baby
Clothes too. She
and also
smelled.
before she gave Nicole to Emily, she sniffed her and then.
Yeah, my next note was on Nick and the fight at the job center, just that it really reminded me the way that guy aggresses upon him reminds me of the Nick and Luke fight, but in the job center fight, Nick is pre-Gilead Nick and he's reacting a lot. And then fast forward to the Luke fight, but Luke trying to fight him, and Nick's just like, no, I'm not fighting you. I'm not here to fight you. He's so well in control of himself, even when he's being physically assaulted by somebody.
Doesn't it make you wonder what led to him being so under control? What broke him?
Yeah, I mean the difference is so dramatic between.
Huge.
I mean, I think in that scene though, like it's like in the scene with him and Luke though, it's largely because like he feels a lot of guilt even being around Luke.
Yeah.
Because he's sitting there lying and saying, lying and saying that it's Martha's baby and stuff. Yeah.
No, I get it. That has to be like, oh man, he deals with so much. Okay, and then in the coffee shop with Price gives Nick a fake Bible quote, and then Nick pushes back, and then Price says, well, there is one that does say idleness makes the house fall apart. I did not write that directly, I don't think. Something to the effect of idleness makes the house fall apart. And I thought that was apt for Gilead, because they've created this world where people can't do shit, women can't do anything, and Serena burns the house down and everybody's miserable, and idleness does make the house fall apart. You're right.
Do we also need a reference here 4:10? I think we do. Just the fact that Nick has the scripture reference ready to go, the Bible quote ready. Yeah.
Yes. It is important because it shows he truly is, like Scarlett was saying, he's a man of God, right? Of faith. He actually knows the Bible, and he's going to enforce, what's the line? I've seen it so many times. Thank you. Yes. God is not to be mocked. Whatever man sows, so shall he reap. You did this to yourself, Commander.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, you did.
But June and Nick and Eden are the only 3 people in Gilead that quote the Bible as the way it is.
Correctly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. To tie into that, I also noticed, in the scene where Fred is complaining about everybody being against him. I can't help feeling there's a target on my back, he says.
Yeah.
And oh, Fred, if only you knew the target that is on your back.
It's in that room with you.
Yeah, it's in the room with you. Yeah. When he said that, I was like, oh boy, Fred, just you wait. Just you wait. That target is gonna come back to haunt you.
I love how our deep dives are actually discussing this episode in the context of a season 4 finale.
Oh yeah. Correct.
Well, they tied up a lot of
it.
threads, I think, in that
They
episode
did.
too. Yeah. They brought a lot of threads back in, which is really cool, which is why that episode is so good.
I mean, I think there's literally a rule that in every deep dive we have to mention either 409 or 410 or both.
I bet we've checked that box every single time.
Yeah, I think so.
Mine, I guess we talked about this a little before. I have it in deep dives, but there's nothing you can do about it. Just Nick saying that, it's such a Nick lifetime parallel throughout the show, throughout everything, until we get to the season 4 finale when he finally does something about the wrongs to his life and his family, right? I mean, through all 3 seasons, you know, even in season 3, June's like, all right, so you can get Hannah and get me out because he's a commander now. And he's like, I'm sorry. She's like, what are you good for? Right? Like, it's just this constant theme of like, I'm not good enough. I can't fix the problems in my life or in my family, like specifically, as we learned in this episode. I can't save my brother, the alcoholic. I can't save my dad. We don't have enough money. We get to Gilead. I can't save June. I can't, like, constantly. There's nothing I can do about it. And then finally, in season 4, things start to change, and he brings June her rapist, and now Fred is dead, and there was something he could do about it. So,
well, and I love how all of that just shows again how his long con game was the right thing to do, because there were so many times when he could have done something that people might say like he should have done something and then he'd be dead. So then June would have been on her own and he wouldn't have been able to do anything. So it's interesting, like, seeing that play out now. We see like the result of having gone through all the stuff they went through and to get to that point.
Yeah, having to put up with the things that they had to put up with, both of them did, knowing that they were in it for, like you said, the long game, and it worked, and they both gained the power they needed to kill the rapists and start to hopefully change Gilead.
You know, and it's also this episode where he says it's better not to form attachments, which yes and no, because once he forms attachments, that gives him what he needs to now fight back, right? You know, it's because he has attachments to June and Holly that he, you know, stops Fred in the hallway so June can leave, or you know, that he brings her Fred so that she can, you know, kill him. So, you know, when he said that, I thought about that and I was like, yes, I get it, but also it made you a better person, I think.
Which he realizes in season 4 for sure.
Yes.
Well, that's why he says, you know, she changed me.
Yeah,
because every time, even in this episode, when she tells him, "Is this it? This is the bullshit life that you want?" Like I've seen him be completely impressed by her fire, by her will to fight. When she says, you know, at least someone will remember me. Like, he's trying to stay alive, and June doesn't. It's not like she doesn't care about, you know, not being alive. She wants to feel alive, and he makes her feel alive, and the same, she makes him feel alive. So it's kind of like a constant till season 4, you know, and that's what changes him. The fact that she kept pushing against the system when he was more kind of compliant, like he kind of wakes up. And when Kate said in season 3, I saw that episode the other day, when she asked him, what are you good for? Like, he's devastated when she tells him, what are you good for? And I think all of that just fell into place, you know, till our amazing season 4.
I think as hateful as she was being to him, like, she was just lashing out, but I bet that line stuck with him pretty severely, and that's why he's collecting data on Hannah. And I mean, he should be doing that anyway, of course, but I just doubt that he let go of that line knowing Nick Blaine.
I agree.
Hopefully he felt good about bringing her Fred.
Definitely made an impact on him.
Yeah. And what you mentioned earlier, just a minute ago, Tina, about him holding up Fred, that came up also on the internet recently, and people were confused, like, why he became a commander. And I had seen in a Joe Fiennes interview that he said that Commander Waterford purposefully made him a commander so that he would have to go to the war front after he had held him at gunpoint so that June could escape. He was so upset
Right.
by seeing Nick actually love his family more than Waterfoot had ever felt that, you know?
That's what kept
can't see
Waterford in
that.
that
They just
room.
don't get
He
it.
was overwhelmed
Right.
by Nick's love for June and his child.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Nick could have died right there.
Yeah.
You can't hold a commander at gunpoint.
Right.
He'd be put on the wall.
I assume he assumed he was going to die, in fact, you know?
Yeah, I think so too.
Because like you said,
I-
you can't do that.
Another thing
No, you
is
cannot.
proof that Nick is in the resistance is when they did when June in season 4, I think it was season 4, episode 9, when they did the introduction and she was talking about, she was in the court doing her testimony, and she says the resistance movement in Gilead gave me the means to escape or something like that, and it flashed back to Nick. I don't understand why people don't pick up those little nuggets of that they're constantly giving us.
I only have 2 more notes. That Fred breathes her in, just like she breathes him in before she kills him.
He just sniffs her. He's just gross.
That's true. She breathes in his life.
She
force
breathes
before she
in.
kills him.
She
Like
wants
a
to
dementor.
I like that.
It's like a
not want to
dementor sucking
forget
out
that
the
smell
soul.
of fear on Fred.
The only other thing I have with the parallels for this episode is that in this one, Nick decides to tell June his name. She's clearly upset because he's tried to quote unquote break up with her. And she tells him, I don't know anything about you. And I guess he decided to break this grand romantic gesture of telling her, I'm Nick Blaine from Michigan. And he fails miserably because she really doesn't give a shit. And it doesn't really mean anything. And that's, I guess, that contrast to episode 6 when, you know, she's upset after the Mexican delegation and he calls her off it and she tells him, don't call me that. That's not my name. And eventually tells him, my name is June. So I think that was a very important piece of information, obviously, because at this point, I think it's the first time she's actually given her name to someone, her real name from before. So I think it contrasts to, you know, poor Nick's attempt to make her feel better. And the only response he gets is under his eye, Guardian Blaine.
And so obviously this episode is where we first learn about Jezebels, which is going to pop up in the show several times, including the season 4 finale, which we like to deep dive talk about. But I saw a funny story from a friend on the internet that is also an Osblane fan that was an extra in the Jezebel scene in 410. And that's basically just when they're dancing around while she's like remembering Jezebels, kind of like getting ready to remember it when she kills Fred. And but she said that on the actual scene that Joe finds and Lizzie came around, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys, I'll tell my version of the story. I think some of you know the correct version. But so Lauren was one of the extras dancing, and Lizzie and Joseph Fiennes came around and talked to each of them and asked if they would be cool with doing, instead of what they're supposed to be doing, suddenly doing a take of like disco dancing to surprise the director. And of course, anybody would be cool with anything that Lizzie and Joe asked of them. So they all got a chance to kind of like chat with them, and they were super friendly, and it happened, and it was really funny. And I just like, I think that's a really cool story of how fun they are on the set. We hear a lot how fun they are on the set, but that was my first actual person on the set story. Did I get those details right? Anyone?
You did. You nailed it. A cool detail I was reading though, she did say the song they chose to do the disco dance to was Staying Alive, which she said she thought was a funny choice given what happens to Fred at the end of the episode. So, and I have to agree. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
They're so fun.
Excellent choice of song.
Yes. What a great cast.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that is a wrap on our deep dive into season 1, episode 8. I just wanted to talk about the crew for a second. This episode was directed by Kate Dennis, and the writers on this episode were Kira Snyder, John Herrera, Nina Fiore, and Lynn Renee Maxey. So thank you for listening, and we hope to see you next week. On Monday, we'll do our spoiler-free analysis of Season 1, Episode 9. And meantime, have a great weekend. Thanks again for listening to Above the Garage.
You know, I think about us, the three of us, what we could be. I think about it all the time.
Please. It's terrible.
No, it's not. I know June. She's my friend. I care about her. How's her day going? You look pretty.
Thanks. I wore it just for you. Her father's a driver named Nick. He helped me to survive. Yes, you can, because I can't lose you.
I'm not gonna let anything happen to you.
What about you?
Your girlfriend is a badass.